Hello, I'm Tracy and welcome to my YouTube channel, another plein air adventure. So this is the scene I'm going to paint today. There's some beautiful rocks around on the edge here and a nice bit of reflection in the water. There's a great little, actually a little further over, there's a little bit of a sandbar and then some greenery that's lit up on the other side. So yeah, enjoyed the video. Just got my colors out on the palette, so I'm just going to start the block in now. Gonna start the painting with just a really light drawing. A little bit of burnt sienna here. And I've got my little scene finder here. These rocks down at the front here. Burnt sienna and a little bit of violet I'm using here. And then there's the distant shore. That little piece of green island there is going to be my focal point that's jutting out here. I just really like that bright green there. Comes out. There's a water reflections in there too. The shore comes around from the other side there. It has some. This is just a very basic color blocking that I'm doing here right now. Goes around the far side. Fairly bright in the top here of this. And that water again. Some beautiful warm tones in the back there. Greens and golds, and I'm just scrubbing those in. They're rough. A little bit of a distant hill showing in there. There's a tree that sits in that area. And lots of oranges in that back. Fall is in full swing here right now, so it's beautiful. One of my favorite times to be out here painting. It's just amazing. So I'm just scrubbing in these colors, just a mixture of greens and warms and a fairly dark area in here above those rocks. And it's fairly cool and shady in this area down here. Working on a Canson artboard today. After reading up on casein, I guess you're better off to work on a more solid background, they say. So I see some burgundies in that little area right in there in the far distance. So I'm just sort of hinting at those now so that I remember them later. A little bit in there too, just a hint of a little burgundy bush. This area in here is quite some shadows in it right now. I'm going to actually grab a little bit larger brush here for this. Just some nice deep greeny ochre colors in there. I've got a little bit of orange in my palette here that I'm adding that green to, and just a tad bit of the violet. We'll put a little burnt sienna in there to mellow that down a little too. can actually see some bright reflections in that water here, so we'll just kind of hint at those now. We can brighten those up a little later. Very, very simple, just laying in base colors of what I see. There's an evergreen back in here, so we're going to go fairly dark with that. Very cool on this dark side here. The light is coming across and hitting on the other side there, so we're definitely going to need these to be fairly dark on this side here. That water that comes in on that back side is quite dark also. Now there's a rock that's sitting kind of about there. Using some raw umber there. We'll be detailing that out a little bit more as we go. This rock that's a little bit further back is just slightly warmer, a little bit lighter. So I'm using a little burnt sienna there and with that raw umber. And that kind of just comes into this area here. Just want to cool that down with a little bit of blue there. Give it some darkness also. And the back side of this rock is quite dark too. There's definitely some highlights showing through on those that we'll be picking up later. And very dark along the bottom edge of that rock. And I just got to get a little bit of white out on my palette now. So far, really enjoying the art board, the Canson art board. Feels good. Want to hint at some of that shape there of that rock. A little bit warmer there behind. I've got a violet-y undertone on that rock. I'm just going to add a little bit of violet to that burnt sienna and get that in behind. A very dark little spot there at the bottom too. And then that water comes in behind there also. Kind of like I say, a soft browny violet as those sand and rock come down the back there. Just actually still finding the drawing a little bit there, defining those rock edges a bit. this area in the front is that really rocky, pebbly area. Kind of a mixture, kind of a violet-y tone there, just to suggest that right now so I can see where it is. It's kind of fun at this stage to try to keep it as loose as you can, because later on some of these loose bits will show through the painting and give it a kind of a sense of life, and that's the joy of painting plein air, is that. And there's a little bit of that shoreline here also, which we'll want to come back and highlight later. Now these greens in this area here tend to be a little darker, so we'll darken that edge up a bit. Even that little outcrop there of brightness, there's some dark in there around where the sun's not touching. I'm going to throw some little hints of dark in that area behind also. Now some of the lighter bits on that water, I want to get those in now while I see them. They're very kind of ochre, and they kind of run like a highlight right through here. A little more yellow than that, I think. And a touch of green in there also. And that bank is just a little lighter on that side. And we'll be brightening that up even more later. Now I want to get that sky in behind there. I'm going to put a little bit of yellow ochre in with my ultramarine and titanium white there, because it's fairly pale, that sky, today. A little lighter as it comes down into the horizon there. Some of these light notes in that I'm seeing there of the trees and that area. very ochre with those grasses in the distance there. And then that hill just behind has got kind of a nice sagey tone as the light's hitting it. And down in the lower area there where the sun isn't hitting it, let's get a little bit darker tone. Adding some yellow now into that cad orange that I've been using for some of these lighter notes. Now I really want to get that note of really bright green in while it's still there. And that's right in this little area, and just a hints of that at the back there too. Some duller greens that I've mixed a little violet into on that far bank there. And just going to scrub in a few different greens for color notes in there. Just want to restate how dark some of those are in the far distance there. Everything in this scene is backlit, which I like. There's a little more interest to the scene. Brighten up some of these little reflections that I'm seeing in the water there. I'm kind of working fast because I want to make sure I get these color notes in there before the light changes too much on me here, which can happen. It's kind of later in the afternoon, so lots of those bright reflections in the front of those rocks there. That distant bit of shore is quite light, so I'm just lightening that up a bit right now. There's a few shadows that are running across it, and then some more greens on this area closer up. Oops, that was a little intense. We'll just put a little burnt sienna in that green to mellow that down a little bit there. And some of these more distant ones are a little less chroma also. That shoreline over there is in the shade, so I'm doing kind of a yellow ochre violet there, putting that in there just to show how deep and dark that is, and then we'll come back and kind of lighten some of that up with some light greens over top just to give it some contrast. And there's also some little bit of rockery along that shoreline too. I'll just get those color notes in there now while I see them. And those light reflections in the water there. So I get some of those grasses on the far side too. And some of these warm but not quite as vibrant grasses here on the edge. Lots of colors, just tons of colors, so it's really fun to just really mix up a whole bunch of warm tones. And there's some shadows here that are coming along that distant shoreline. I'll get those in here. And some of the lighter tops of some of these grasses, they're closer to me. Now the sky is reflecting in this piece of water right here, so I'm going to go in with some ultramarine blue and some white. My brush is a bit dirty, so that's dulling it down a bit, which is good because I don't want that to look too stark, too light. A little thicker there. I've got some yellow ochre in with that ultramarine blue. Oops, that was a little too blue. And that's just reflecting that sky. I'm definitely going to have to lighten that. That's just... And that comes all the way across from that far side there. And a few little sky bubbles also in the water that are around those reflective trees. So just need to get more white out on my palette here. So I got that white out on my palette, and I just grabbed a few different brushes because I want to kind of start stating a little bit more of the detail yet now without going too crazy. A little bit smaller brush here. Some of these rocks that are kind of backlit are looking fairly dark in the foreground here, and just gonna sort of scrub in a little bit of an impressionistic sort of a feel. A little bit of violet and some burnt umber or raw umber for this. That's fairly dark here. Some of these rock, like I say, they're backlit, so along that closer shoreline. Very, very rough. Kind of a walk in here to and I'll lighten that just a little bit as we come more forward. I'm just going to scrub in some different tones there to give an impression. We can work on a little bit more detail with those rocks a little bit later. There's a darker area that's actually kind of wet towards the back here too. Highlight out some of those rocks later to build a better impression. Now I want to use some of that same color on this big rock that's jutting out there. I guess the kids like to do some swimming in this little water hole, but they have to be very careful because sometimes that water just isn't deep enough when they first get out here. So just putting some textures in that rock there. A little bit more of a highlight on that front side. Trying to stay as true as possible to the scene without getting obsessed with every little detail, because we do have limited time out here. I generally like to get these paintings done in about an hour and a half at the most, so sometimes they can take a little bit longer, but that's my goal. Trying to change direction with the brush a little bit so that it gives it a little more texture. And some of these little faces of rocks there along that far edge. Need to spray down my palette here. It is casein, so it will dry. Stays wet quite a long time if you use a sponge or a paper toweling underneath your main blobs of paint, and then you can actually still rework these paints if you spray them a little bit if they've dried out. But I do tend to like to work a little bit fresher with these paints because it's more similar to oil that way. I kind of moved away from the gouache because I was using them too wet, and I'm just not as happy with it as far as a plein air type of a medium for me, because I do like oil. Oil would be my favorite medium, but it's just not as practical for packing up and taking on these little bicycle adventures. Redefining some of these colors that are in that water in front of the rocks there just a bit more. There's actually some even brighter colors coming into that now that I kind of like, so I'm gonna state those a little bit. All these grasses on the other side there are quite bright also. Highlight some of these distant lighter bushes and a bit more cad yellow with some titanium white in there. And there's a little bit of warm greens in these rocks behind these greens behind the rocks here, so we'll put some of that in there. Varying up that color just a little bit with some lighter tones also. Just for interest. Oops, just dropped my brush. Playing around with some different greens that I'm seeing in those distant hills. And they're light, but they're more in a soft, sort of a paley, sagey tone. The light is definitely hitting those distant areas, but it's sort of a washed out, sort of a green back there. I like this brush. It's a very soft, sort of a dagger on it, synthetic brush. It has a lot of movement because the length of the bristles are quite long, so it enables me to really get some loose kind of brush marks in there. Just kind of catching some of the lighter, sagier greens that I see there. There's a evergreen in this area right here. So I just want to kind of hint at those branches. Don't want to do anything too precise there. And some branches of one of those cottonwoods sort of broken up through there also. There's a tree now I want to put in there that's just past this little island here, and it's sticking up into the sky a little higher than some of the other trees in here. So sort of looks like it's died on the top there, so I just want to throw some of these branches in that sort of are bare. A few bugs coming out here. And there's definitely some warmer colored leaves on the lower part of that. Not overly bright, but they're they are hit by that sun. Oh, yeah, the mosquitoes are officially out right now. I thought we were done with those, but apparently not. Brighten up this water line here, the reflection of the sky. And create a little bit more of a shoreline on that far side there. Some of that needs to be darkened along the bottom edge there. And then there's some of the reflections from that tree actually coming through the edge with that broken stem sort of. Sorry if I go quiet through this. Some of this more detailed stuff takes a little more focus. Now that is definitely lit on this one side, so I'll lighten up on that edge. Hoping I don't have to get the bug juice stuff out. Hate wearing that stuff, it stinks. But a little lighter in that reflection of the sky up here. I want to put a few more trunks on that far shore. Mixing a little bit of raw umber up right now with some violet, and just want to hint at just a few more of those trunks on the far side. There's also some reflections of those coming through the water. I don't want to overdo this because they're very kind of faint actually, but we do want to put them in there. I have a feeling it's a fly that's bothering me. All the joys of plein-airing. Now while I'm doing those trunks, I also noticed that there was a nice long trunk on the other side here that's sort of laying down. And another one that's sort of jutting up. And I'm going to let those dry, and then I'll just sort of brush over them with a little bit of those grasses again so they don't look like they're just standing out there for no reason. Now, I want to do a little bit more in those little shorelines now. Brighten that one up a little bit in a few spots. Kind of using that violet-y, greeny, raw umbery sort of a mixture here. There's actually a little bit of that pathway that comes down here too. And a little bit of it I can see in that far distance there. I actually want to brighten that up though, where the sun is catching it on the other side a little bit more. Using a little bit of yellow ochre in that to just warm it up. Add a tiny bit of burnt sienna to that also, because it actually looks quite warm in some of these spots where that light's really hitting. I'm going to put a little bit of a brighter front on that rock because I want to see that contrast just a bit more. It's nice if you find a color that it's a good idea to look around the rest of the painting and see where else you can drop notes of it, because it kind of ties it all together when you get those same colors in there. Now I want to get a little bit more of that. First I gotta just wash this brush out really good. I want to get a little bit more of that greeny ochre color in that back shade area. A little bit of raw umber in there also to mellow that down. It's quite dark back there, but it's also very kind of greenish. And that water kind of comes right behind that area. And just a little bit of that darker green I want to put into this reflection too. I feel like I've lost some of those darker notes in there. And on that distant shore there, the reflection of the grasses. And in here also there's a green reflection. And along this edge here. Also some warmer tones in that reflection on this side. Just defining some of these darks on the backside so that that rock in the foreground pops a little bit more. Taking some of that soft green that I have in my palette and just kind of softening this reflection of that one tree in there. And then I just want to take a little bit more of that color and just a little bit darker and push it into the tree. I can already see that the light is changing in my picture. And I do actually want to capture the way that sun is starting to hit that back hill back here. Yellow ochres in these grasses standing out nicely. There's some bright splashes of green on this edge here, Careful to put them in the reflection also. A little bit of burnt umber with my violet there, just to redarken some spots in this bank on the far side, and this distant bank also. Let's do a little bit more defining here, just some rough little shapes of rocks. I certainly don't want to paint every individual rock in there, but just want to give a very loose impression of them. So we'll start with the darks first, and then we'll go over with some lights there, and that'll give it a little bit of dimension. And I think I need a little bit of green in that reflection just underneath the shoreline there. Got sidetracked there. Let's go back into these rocks. I do like to actually move all over the canvas, because if you work in one spot for too long, you can sort of start over focusing on it and over detailing, and it's nice to come out with a balanced picture all over, and not just one area that's been detailed more than others. Those shadows, let's get those shadows back in there. Now I want some bright yellows in that area where the sun is really hitting it here. And let's start with some deeper yellows and sort of brighten them up. I like to, when I'm using a color, try to just move it, keep it moving around the board in other areas too, and that definitely kind of ties it all together. I just want to restate some darks in that background here. It is in the shadows, so And just hinting at this evergreen here. There's sort of a little mishmash of them in that area. Hey! Yeah, have fun. I'm having fun. Yeah, I actually brought a little 7-Up with me.
That's lovely, dear.
Yeah,
That came out beautiful, didn't it, eh?
you like it?
Good idea.
Hubby's my biggest fan.
Hey?
I'm talking to my camera.
Yeah, I know. It's for good reason, though.
Yeah.
It's not hard to be a fan when you're a good artist there, eh? Good lighting, honey.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Did I capture it?
You did. Charming picture. Excellent. Yeah.
Well, I just want to down to just doing some really fine details in this now. It's such a lovely picture or a reference that it's hard not to spend a little extra time with it and just go in and put some really fine details of the reflections and of the rocks and things, and it just really is pulling it all together and bringing it alive. And I want to detail just a little bit more these rocks that are along the shore. Kind of switching the color up just a little bit, adding some blues into it just for some different textures when you look. No, rocks aren't generally all the same color. And mind you, they tend to look all kind of this muted sort of violet color down here, a lot of them. But it's nice to add a little bit of different tone in there just for interest, even if that's not necessarily what I'm seeing in front of me. So bluing up a few of them just for my fingers are actually getting cold already. It's definitely fall is coming in quick here. A few larger rocks here just in this corner, and There's a few of these rocks that are coming into this area that are backlit, so I want to darken those a little bit. Front edges there. I'll pretty much fill in the details when you look at it, and we kind of want to leave a little imagination for people looking at this scene, and they can develop it on their own. So that's why we don't need to go in there and put every rock, but just an inclination of it so that they can let their imaginations run in. Go a few brighter ones in there. Mix up just a little bit of that yellow in that, just so it's not completely just white. Keeping these brighter ones just sort of near the front here to sort of lead you into the picture. And there's a little line that runs that I want to get. It's a small detail, but it'll ground that far shoreline where the light is hitting. And it's just a little line of highlight that runs kind of all the way along the edge there. So I'm going to use that white with that little bit of warm cad yellow in there. And we'll just kind of put that in there. And just a hint of it sort of in here. You can break that line up a little so it doesn't look too solid. And then we'll just put a little bit more hints of a little bit of a rocks and pebbles on that far distant shoreline there. Well, I think it's time to call this picture now. I think we've taken it as far as it needs to go. We've told the story. My hands are cold. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, try to remember to like and subscribe if you want to see some upcoming videos. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next adventure.